Hello, this is Chuck. Welcome to the Mentored Sprint, and this is a brief introduction to people who are contributing for the first time and are just new to open source. And hopefully, this will help you to start your open source journey a little bit easier. So, we got to cover a few topics at this section. So first of all, what is open source, and then what is a contribution? What counts as a contribution? There are some terminologies that we use in open source world, so hopefully it would help you to get familiar with what we are talking about. And also the last section, we will talk about how to make a pull request. So what is a pull request? I'll tell you, and hopefully you'll try to make your first pull request as well. So first, what is open source and why do we care? So according to Wikipedia, open source software is a computer software that is that have a special license that people can have rights to use, to study, even like distribute the software and change the code of it to anyone. Of course, there are some restrictions. For example, some license that kind of limited the commercial use, or it kind of says that if you want to distribute it, it needs to stay with the same license and all this. So there's some limitation, but in general, it's very free that you could take the code, modify it, and distribute it, your new version without paying a fee. So you may ask, like, if open source is open source software a free software? Is open source equals to free? Well, yes. Open source software is normally free, but it's not equal to free software, because a software can be free but closed source. For example, if I create a product, but I don't show you the code that I created it, but instead I just give you the product for free, like a free version or free trial version of some software. It's not open source. The source code is not open. You don't know how the person created it. One of the example would be some games that you're free to download and play, but you don't know how the game is created. You don't know the code of the game, so it's not open source, but it's free. So open source doesn't equals to just free to use, and also open source usually involve a lot of community work, because it's sharing the source code, sharing the knowledge. So a lot of times that people would discuss about how it should be developed, and there's a lot of community involvement in open source software. So there's a video online on YouTube that is quite good, that explains what is open source, and it uses an example about this couple want to build a house, and how they build this house is that they have an architect who is an open source architect that created this the blueprint of building a house, open source. So the couple can take this blueprint and then hire a company to build it. They can change the company to a better one if they see fit, because it's the blueprint is open, everybody can use it. And then also later they discover that actually someone created a plugin, and then they can just incorporate that plugin, because all of the blueprint, the knowledge, the code are open. So and even the architect originally can benefit from it, because the person who created this third-party plugin, contribute that new plugin back to the original design. So so it's not just building a house; it's like building a house with a lot of new plugin as well. So there's a lot of benefit in open source software, and that's why it's getting very popular right now. So I recommend you to go to the link and watch the video. I'm not going to play it now because it's several minutes long, but it's a very fun video to watch. Okay, so oops, yeah, and so the second part of this section is about what is a contribution. Like, okay, I kind of get what is an open source software. It's kind of interesting. It's fun. I want to be part of it. How can I contribute to it? So, the first thing comes to your mind, maybe, fixing a bug. Maybe if I'm very confident. If I found a bug, I can fix it. But most of the time, you may encounter a bug, but you are not able to fix it because you may be new to that software. You don't know how all the code actually work, or if you want to work on that project, maybe you haven't used it enough to find a bug. So bug fixing is not the only thing you could do to contribute. Everybody can do something. For example, if you found a bug, you can report the bug, right? You can report an issue. Most of the time, the maintainer will ask you to provide a reproducible example. Usually, it's a smaller one instead of maybe you found it while you're working on your grand project. Of course, you don't want to, show everything to other people because they may not care everything about your project. But if you can provide a small reproducible example that people who want to fix the bug can use it to test, to figure out the problem or test whether the fixes works, they can use that. So that would be reporting an issue. Usually in the repository, which I'll explain later, there is a place that you could report the issue. So a different open source project, they would tell you there's some way to report the issue. So you can maybe usually you can find it in the documentation and just help other people to fix the bug by reporting the bug. Another thing you can do is to write tests. So because writing tests, I always say that writing tests is as important as writing the code because since a lot of people are contributing, there will be a lot of changes in the code. How can we make sure that working on one part of the code doesn't break the other part of the code? It's by writing unit tests. So so writing tests is very important as well. You can contribute by adding more tests to the code that could increase the code stability and increase the code coverage, the test coverage of the code. So that's also very important. Writing documentation is also important because you can have an amazing software but no one knows how to use it. That's not very good. Also documentation help others to understand the code, also like help new contributors to understand what this bit of for example a function, like what it does and then how it works and where everything is. So writing documentation also help. Another thing is tutorials. For a lot of projects, of course they want more users, especially like if you kind of encounter a project that you think is amazing, you love using it, but there isn't enough tutorial, then maybe you can just contribute by writing a tutorial, a blog post to help new users to start using this amazing software, or just to introduce it to other people trying to solve the same problem. Answering questions online, there are online forums, there are like Stack Overflow or this. So if you are using one of the software or one of the Python libraries that you're very familiar with it, there will be people who are new to it and don't know how to use it properly or use it to solve the problem, or you can help answering questions. So that would be also contributing to the community as well. Of course, if you're a very advanced user, you can suggest some new features or even implement it and ask the maintainer whether they could incorporate your new feature. But that's more advanced. So most of the time, it will be more like reporting issues, writing documentation, writing tests. So that would be more like a common way to contribute to open source. So terminology. So I have sometimes I've mentioned something like repository, pull requests. What are they, right? So before that, I want to talk about the tools and also the web servers that you encounter and we will talk about all the time. First of all is Git. So Git is a revision control tool, which means that instead of sometimes, for example, if you have write a essay with your teammate at school, let's say, if you're not using a revision control system, you may have to write your bit and then send it to your teammate, and then they may make changes of it. They will make a copy of it and then make changes and send it back to you. So you have a copy of your original, and then you send it to the third teammate, and then they would make another copy. So it would be a copy of your work, which is very annoying. So I'm sure that a lot of us have encountered that before, right? So using Git actually avoid this situation. It's kind of a system that kind of keep track of what has been changed by who, and then when you kind of combine them back together, it will kind of see, oh, actually it makes sense to combine it this way. And also you can also manually look at, oh, if there's a conflict, if something, if some changes has been done by two person at the same time, then you can manually decide which change to incorporate. So it's a very good tool that is used by a lot of open source software developers. I'm not going to dive deep into how to use Git, but later in the exercise of making your first pull request, you will also encounter some Git commands, which I think is a good place to start. If you're interested to learn more about Git, there is also a Pro Git book that is a free ebook online that you could have a deeper look yourself. GitHub is, the name already tell you, it's like something that is related to Git. I would say that it's more like a cloud version of Git, that everything is stored online. You can store it, instead of storing your code in your computer, you can store your code online, so it's easy to share it among different people, and different people could collaborate together using GitHub. But GitHub now is like providing also a lot of different tools to help developing open source software as well. For example, there's GitHub Action. It also provides a platform for you to raise issues, to discuss about the project and all this. So it's quite a good web service. I think a lot of the projects in the sprints also use GitHub to host the source code. Gitlab is another web service that is similar to GitHub, but it's just another company. So some of the projects that you encounter, maybe they host on GitLab instead of GitHub. So just to mention a few names, so when you see it, it won't be too alien to you. There's other terminology that we use. There's fork, which means that you make a copy of the source code, and that copy will be under your account. We do that in open source ecosystem because a lot of times the only person who has the right to change the original code is the maintainer themselves. So as a contributor, you don't have the access right to the original source code. So what you do is that you make a copy of it, and it's under your account, so you have access right to it. And then after you make the changes, then you can send a pull request to ask to incorporate your change. So pull request is it's like sending a message to the original code, the maintainer of the original code, to look at, oh, I have done this change. Do you like it? Do you want to incorporate that? So a lot of times that, especially for new contributors, it will kind of require a code review of reviewing your PR, your pull request, to see if your changes is correct, if the style is correct. A lot of times that there will be contribution guideline that if you follow, then most of the time is the pull request will be accepted fairly quickly. But sometimes, if you're new, like everybody would make mistake, then you could, you need to make some changes, and then until, and then if, your work is good, then the maintainer will incorporate your change. And then a repository. So what is a repository? So you can think of a repository as like a folder that is containing everything in your project. So you may, in your project, it could contain multiple files of code. You may package your code in different modules. It could including the code for the test. It could include the documentation. It could be anything. So we just call them repository. You will encounter different repository very often when you browse on GitHub. So each project is basically like a repository. So it's like a folder. So there's another video here that I recommended to watch. Is about how the process of contributing to open source work. So it uses an analogy of making cookies to kind of explain how you could take the recipe and then make changes to it, and then ask for incorporation back into the codebook, or you can keep developing your recipe into a new product, a new type of cookie. So yeah, so this is a very, again, I won't play the video, but I would recommend you to check it out to see how, open source development work, and then what is upstreaming, how to, make changes and ask for the change to be incorporated back into the original, so you become a contributor. So I won't play this. The last bit is about how to make a pull request and then where to start. So like I said before, contribution is not limited to changing the code or writing documentation or or writing the test, but most of the time is either writing documentation, writing the test, or fixing a bug, right? So a lot of times you have to send a pull request because you have make changes to the repository, to the project. So it's quite good skills to learn how to make a pull request. And what I'm going to explain is to assume that the project is hosted on GitHub. It should be similar if it's hosted on Gitlab or Bitbucket, other services. It should be fairly similar, but GitHub is very popular, so I use it as an example. So here you can see an example here that there is, for example, if I want to contribute to Numpy, so I found this repository on GitHub. Is the Numpy repository, that is the official one because it's under the organization Numpy. And so everything above the line is on GitHub, everything below the line is on my local computer. So what I do is that first I make a fork of it, and then so it will have a new version of Numpy under my account check, for example. So the reason, again, for doing this is that I don't have access rights to the Numpy repository, but I have access rights to the check Numpy repository. So now, since everything is on GitHub, I should actually put it on my computer to start working, right? So I would make a clone to my computer. So if it's a brand new, if you don't have anything in your computer about Numpy yet, then it will be a clone, so it's just a copy. But for example, if you have worked on Numpy before, you already have a version of it in your computer, you want to update it, then it will be a pull. So now I have the check Numpy code in my computer. I can make changes to it, right? I can start working on it. Of course, usually I recommend people to look at the contribution guideline before you make the changes, because it could be the coding style you have to follow, or just to make sure that the change you made actually will be accepted. That's your goal, right? So make sure that you read all the information that you need to know. Sometimes it's good to talk with the maintainer online before you work on it. So after that, after you're happy with your work, there is also, in Git, we also will have to commit the change and all this, but I won't explain it here. It's just a general overview. But when you try it yourself, then you see that actually you have to commit your change. It's kind of like saving your change. So after that, everything you're happy about, then you want to push your change back to the GitHub. So it's basically like uploading your work. So after that, then your work is updated, right? So your changes is now populated to your check Numpy repository on GitHub. And now you can make a pull request and then ask the maintainer of Numpy is that, hey, hello, I'm Chuck, I've made this change. It will fix one bug that has been reported. Is this change good? Will you accept it? So it may be some back and forth. They may come back and say like, oh, it's good, but I may want you to write one more test to make sure that is correct. Then okay, you write another test, and then you do the same thing again. You push it to your repository, and then and then the change will usually be automatically updated on your PR if you work on GitHub. So that's the general overview of how to make a pull request. I know it's a little bit complicated. It will be much easier if you try it yourself and work on it. So I have a little step-by-step tutorial that is on slides.com. The link is there. You could use it to do it step-by-step to make a pull request yourself. It's actually making a pull request to a beginners-friendly repository that basically is not there's no code there, it's just for people to practice how to make a pull request. So you can try it yourself. And that's it for this introduction. And so thank you so much for joining the sprints. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us, the organizers, at mentorsprint.dev. And also follow us on Twitter, so you know that when is the next sprint. You may want to join the sprints as well. So thank you so much, and enjoy.